Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Thomas Waldegiergis, and I'm one of the organizers of this seminar. We are honored to have Dr. Gaim Kibreab join us today. And this seminar series is organized by the Association of Eritrean Studies. And Mahari is going to say a few words about the association and the Eritrean Studies Journal, and he's going to introduce our speaker today. Go ahead, Mahari.
Can you see my my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Slide, in a slide mode?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Thomas. This is our fifth seminar organized by the Association of Eritrean Studies that also administer the journal Eritrean Studies Journal. Our guest today is Professor Gaim Kibreab. He's going to give a topic, a special seminar topic on Eritrea, more than half a century of displacement, Boon or Bane. I was searching for it, how to pronounce it. He will do it much better than I do. Brief introduction about Professor Gaim. He's a professor of research, director of refugee studies at the School of Law and Social Science in London, South Bank University. He has retired in 2021. He wrote many books, many publications, among them Eritrea, A Dream Deferred, People on the Edge in the Horn, the Eritrean National Service. He's going to talk a little bit more about himself during the presentation. So I will briefly introduce about the association. We have been doing this every time that we organize a seminar. It's mainly to show what is our aim, what's the aim of the association, and what do we do. So Association of Eritrean Studies is a continuation of the former associations led by Eritreans and friends. It serves as a platform for scholarly and scientific endeavors with the following main purposes: promote scholarly research on Eritrea and its neighboring regions. It also serves as a forum. The association administers a publication, the Eritrean Studies Journal. It promotes publication, produce on a timely and up-to-date research results and other scholarly information, organize conferences, forums, and social media events. It's going to organize annually a conference. We are still discussing when to start it and where to put it. So if you have any opinions or if you are interested to participate, please contact us. One of the products that the association is going to administer is the Eritrean Studies Journal. It's a peer-reviewed, open access international journal. We're collaborating with the Red Sea Press for its publication. It focuses on humanities, social sciences, natural sciences, technology, engineering, data and informatics. And the third focus area is public health and medical sciences. In the website for the society is published. You can find it at eritreastudies.org. Our goal this year is to have a first issue of the journal. Authors could submit their manuscript to the Eritrean Studies A@gmail.com. The target for now is to collect manuscripts June 1st, 2022. We also encourage for membership. The annual membership fee is $120. It's free for undergraduate studies, undergraduate students, and members from Africa or other developing countries. So I would leave now the floor to the presenter. Just a housekeeping practice that we do in this webinar. It's going to be recorded and share it on YouTube. If you have any questions, you could write it at the chat space. Preferably, you could delay it to the end, but if you want to ask, it's up to the presenter how he wants to conduct the question and answer. If you're interested again to continue participating with us, you will find it in our email, Facebook, Twitter, and you could also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mahari. Dr. Gaim, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I've already made you the co-host. You can upload your slides.
Oh, I don't have slides.
Okay, that's good. That's perfect. Fine. Yeah.
Okay, I don't have slides. I should have prepared, but I didn't.
That's all right.
Okay. What I intended to do is to introduce the subjects, the main highlights, and then the discussion is more important than my presentation, but I will raise some critical issues so that we could expand on them during the discussion. The title of my talk, as you have seen it, is Eritrea More Than Half a Century of Displacement, Boon or Bane. Usually, displacement is considered as a negative phenomenon, but there may be some direct and indirect advantages also that could benefit the country concerned or the people in question. We raise some of this in my presentation, especially towards the end. As the distinguished anthropologist Nadel wrote in the early 1940s, Eritrea was for centuries the scene of migrations into its territory and across it. The result is, in this comparatively small population, a mosaic of tribes, races, linguistic groups have been formed. As the quotation indicates, Eritrea and its inhabitants are therefore the product of constant processes of immigration and emigration. In the light of this historical fact, some observers may argue that what has been unfolding, including in post-independence Eritrea, reflected in very large scale population movements, is not surprising, because this is a continuation of what has already been there. However, as we shall see throughout the presentation, what the proponents of the latter view miss is the fact that, unlike in the migration-emigration processes that is to take place prior to the advent of the Eritrean national liberation struggle, the large-scale displacements that have been taking place since the 1960s are unidirectional. That is, people are fleeing from Eritrea. There are very few or no people returning to Eritrea, save the annual influxes, summer influxes of the diaspora, derogatorily referred to as beles. As a result, Eritrea's most precious resource, manpower or human capital, has been hemorrhaging. Unless this is substantially countered, in the long term, this hemorrhage may threaten the economic and political viability of Eritrea, which is the result of enormous sacrifices of lives, resources, and foregone opportunities. Hundreds of thousands of Eritreans have risked life and limb to cross the borders into neighboring countries in search of protection and safety. An unknown number, undoubtedly thousands, if not tens of thousands, have disappeared in the Sinai Desert, and Sahara deserts, previously en route to Israel and currently to Libya. Others have perished in the Mediterranean Sea while trying to reach the shores of the EU countries. Many others have suffered inhumane and degrading treatment, including enslavement, torture, rape, and other forms of inhumane treatment at the hands of traffickers and rapacious government officials in transit countries and elsewhere. It is important to underscore the fact that these phenomena were already widespread in Eritrea. The Eritrean social and political landscape has been marked by absolute dearth or lack of basic human rights, resulting from lack of respect for the sanctity of rule of law and life. These have been the main drivers of forced migration, both during the 30s war period and in post-independence Eritrea. During the 30s war, hundreds of thousands of Eritreans fled because of the war and widespread persecution perpetrated by the Ethiopian state, both under Emperor Haile Selassie's and Mengistu Haile Mariam's rules. At that time, all the displaced and their families hoped that the war would come to an end, to a victorious end, which it did. All Eritreans also hoped that the defeat and removal of Ethiopia from Eritrea would relegate the phenomenon on forcible displacement to the dustbin of history. After independence, it was expected that not only would those exiled in first countries of asylum return home in safety and dignity, but also the phenomenon of forced migration would cease once and for all in the country. The reason I say first countries of asylum is because I don't expect those who have settled in the global north would return to Eritrea to resettle unless they return after their retirement, if the country is suitable for such kind of situation. However, as history is seldom made to order, we know what happened in post-independence Eritrea. Not only did most Eritrean refugees stayed put or embarked on dangerous secondary migration instead of voting with their feet homewards, but also post-independence Eritrea, contrary to all expectations, has become one of the major producers of refugees. The focus of my presentation is displacement in post-independence Eritrea. For young Eritreans, post-independence Eritrea has become hell on earth and therefore unlivable. It is not surprising, therefore, that tens of thousands of citizens have been voting with their feet in search of safety and dignity. In post-independence Eritrea, not only is the social and political landscape marked by absolute dearth and gross violation of human rights, but also the identity, resilience, agency, and autonomy of all young women and men are attacked by the practice of state authorities and their agencies who ignore their feelings, hopes, and aspirations. The Eritrean reality on the ground. Post-independence Eritrea, contrary to the expectations of all Eritreans and the endless lavish promises of the EPLF leadership, as mentioned earlier, has become hell on earth, where fear, deprivation, indefinite incarceration, disappearance, torture, forced labor, and humiliating and as well as degrading treatment of citizens, especially of young women and men, are the order of the day. In short, the whole population is in the grip of fear and generalized anxiety of disorder. What are the main drivers of forced migration in the country? You know, people don't flee for a single reason. They flee because due to interplay of multiple factors. One of the major drivers of forced migration in post-independence Eritrea is the universal and open-ended national service, which was introduced to foster national unity and economic development, but over time has degenerated into forced labor or modern form of slavery. The Eritrean National Service was originally conceived as a legitimate mega project of social engineering for nation building and common national identity construction. Initially, the majority of citizens received it enthusiastically. However, after the 1998-2000 border war between the governments of Eritrea and Ethiopia, not only has the Eritrean National Service degenerated into indefinite forced labor, but also the government's economic policy and human rights performance have declined markedly. These bleak developments engendered what Albert Hirschman, in a different but similar context, referred to as objectionable state of affairs that may prompt a variety of responses. Accordingly, the disaffected have the following options, according to him: to stay put, to exercise voice and fight to effect political, social, and economic change. 2, to immigrate abroad in search of protection and better life, which Hirschman refers to as the exit option. And 3, to abstain from taking any deliberate action, hoping that things would get better in spite of the decline. Using his seminal theory of exit, voice, and loyalty, I have argued elsewhere that the conscripts of the Eritrean National Service and other young Eritreans approaching the age of conscription have been fleeing from the objectionable state of affairs in the country. The other factors that have been contributing to forced migration are capital and economic decay, resulting from the obsolete technology or outdated business practices and lack of investment. This is because of state monopoly of all economic activities. Lack of property rights reflected on the widespread encroachment by the state and its agents. The government encroaches upon private property and ownership arbitrarily and capriciously. These conditions have stifled the would-be entrepreneurs' incentives. No wonder Eritrea has become a graveyard of obsolete machineries and capital goods. The problem of lack of property rights or insecurity of tenure is also equally rampant in the country. The historically transmitted and socially sanctioned tenurial systems in the country were obliterated by the government's decision to nationalize all land, including in the pastoral areas. Every aspect of life is securitized in the country, resulting in widespread surveillance and dense spy networks, which are penetrating and stifling family life. The net result of this is pervasive mistrust, sometimes including among family members. These inauspicious conditions have stifled citizens' opportunities to make ends meet. The consequence of these sad circumstances is death of a dream to live and thrive in the country, resulting in the incessant flight obsession which has gripped the youth in the country. I don't know how many of you have seen my book, A Dream Deferred, Eritrea Dream Deferred. My original intention was actually to call it Death of a Dream. But I changed my mind after I met a young, dynamic Eritrean girl who came from Seattle to do research in London. She asked me what the title of my book was going to be, and I told her Eritrea, Days of a Dream. She said, maybe the dream of your generation is dead, but how about our dream? And we had an argument, and she convinced me that to call my book Days of a Dream was too bleak and she thought I should actually find another title or another topic, another title. You may know that there's Dream Deferred is a poem, I think, which a Black Afro-American who at that time was, I think, a gay, and he was saying that one day there will be change, and the dream is only deferred, it's not dead. So I thought that was quite opportune, actually, and I called it Dream Deferred. But that deferral is taking too long. I hope it doesn't die. These inauspicious conditions have stifled citizens' opportunities to make ends meet. The consequence of these sad circumstances is death of a dream, to live and thrive in the country, resulting in the incessant flight obsession, which has gripped our youth. As you may know, that the first point of entry after leaving Eritrea is the first countries of asylum, and these are normally Ethiopia and Sudan. But before that, most Eritreans rely on smugglers to leave the country. Smugglers are needed in order to help the refugees evade detection by border control, both of the countries of origin and countries of asylum. And they are voluntarily recruited, and they are considered actually as service providers in the beginning. It can go wrong in the process, but initially it begins as a genuine service provision. Most of the Eritrean refugees I interviewed see at least some smuggling as a form of protection and assistance, although they also recognize that abuses occur, particularly where people fall into the hands of traffickers. It's very complicated at what point or at what stage the people who are smuggled fall in the hands of traffickers. They could be sold by their smugglers, they could be betrayed by their smugglers, or they could be kidnapped and be subjected to trafficking. In contrast to the benign end of smuggling, which holds a degree of legitimacy within communities, trafficking is described as organized and violent crime and hold no legitimacy. Yet, due to the prevalence of criminality on the route, people are knowingly putting themselves at risk of kidnapping for ransom, rape, and torture. They are also putting huge financial and psychological pressures on their families to find money for their release, money they often do not have. The negative ripple effect on Eritrean families across the globe is hard to exaggerate. How many of us have not received distress calls by relatives under torture in the Sinai, in the Sahara, and in Libya? Their irregular entry into neighboring countries, however, and their often precarious status makes individual migrants and refugees vulnerable to trafficking, particularly from refugee camps. Wad Sharifeh and Kibreab are the prominent ones in Sudan. The reason why do the refugees in the first countries of asylum, Ethiopia, Sudan, engage in secondary migration? Many of those who move from the region to Europe do so as a result of failures in refugee policies and practices in first countries of asylum. Policies that have left millions of people living for years and sometimes decades in a protracted situation of exile with no prospect of any real solution. These failures hinge primarily around the emphasis on encampment for those in exile, and failures around access to work and durable solutions. combined this policy failures, have created a semi-permanent state of emergency, jeopardizing quality of life and bringing the humanitarian system to a breaking point. Some of the refugee camps, which were established as a temporary measures, have been institutionalized. For example, the Wad Sharifei refugee camp, which was established, I think, in the early 1970s, is still operating. The Shagarab refugee camp, which was established sometime in the early 1980s, is still operating. And these were established as temporary measures, but they have become institutionalized. And they actually have become centers not of protection, but of abuse and trafficking, actually. How many Eritreans were trafficked from Shagarab? Did the trafficking take place with the knowledge and consent of the authorities, Sudanese authorities? We don't know, but it shows the inadequacy of protection provided in these camps. So the situation is quite bleak, both in Eritrea and in the first countries of asylum. But all is not in vain to some extent. As the title of my conversation indicates, notwithstanding the enormity of the suffering and hemorrhaging of resources afflicting post-independence Eritrea, there are some direct and indirect benefits to be had from the tragedies that have been unfolding in the country. Although the Eritrean diaspora's ability and willingness to invest their human and financial capital in their country is stifled by the government's hostility and myopic policy or lack of policy, to appreciate the Eritrean diaspora's significance, we should ask ourselves what would have happened to the hundreds of Eritrean families, hundreds of thousands of Eritrean families, had there been no remittances from their relatives in the diaspora. Another potential benefit is if there is a political change, meaningful political change in Eritrea, and if the diaspora Eritreans are allowed to return and a conducive environment is created for investment, they would bring their human capital, their financial capital, and they could play a key role in the construction and development of the country. But that depends on the type of political system or political system that is in place. Every one of us has a role to play to bring about that change, because it's likely to fall from the sky. We need to organize ourselves. We need to alleviate the plight of our people, both at home and in the first countries of asylum. Eritreans in the transit countries are actually, some of them are treated as slaves. They are sold, exchanged as if they were commodities. And the Eritreans attract the highest price because of the connections, diaspora connections, and because the smugglers and those who abuse them know we are kind to each other. And when we know our sisters and brothers' lives are in jeopardy, we would leave no stones unturned to help them. And the smuggler and the traffickers and those who exploit our brothers and sisters are very much aware of this. I think I'll stop here, and then I will be happy, more than happy, to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay, the floor is open for questions. Anybody? Unmute yourself, and if you have any questions, go ahead. Raise your hands and we'll do it. Any questions?
Angasom will come.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Okay.
I want to ask By the way, with that hello, we didn't have refugees.
Huh?
With that hello.
No, what the hello alone refugees. Temporary camps galat Komolugan is not
Do you believe that the Eritrean government deliberately neglected the refugees in the Sudan right after independence?
No, I don't. The reason why the refugees did not choose to return is not because the government neglected them, but because most of them visited Eritrea, visited their families, their villages, and they saw the devastation that has occurred, and they saw no opportunities to survive. And that was exacerbated by the government's incompetence or lack of willingness to cooperate with UNHCR and the other UN agencies, and the infrastructure that was destroyed during the War of Independence, or that did not exist and was not rebuilt, could not be rebuilt because it was very hostile to any kind of outside intervention. And they were incompetent. The government was demonstrated utter incompetence and lack of willingness to cooperate with the agencies that wanted to help them. So the refugees saw no opportunity to return or to develop roots and thrive in Eritrea. So, but the Eritrean government did not actively discourage them from returning. I was there myself, both across the borders and inside Eritrea.
But if they want, they could have created, motivated the refugees to. I thought some of the reports show that the Eritrean government carefully calculated to neglect the refugees, so it was not correct.
It is very difficult to know the motive of the Eritrean government. I worked with people who were there, like Wodbaho was the head of ERA, not ERA, but what is it called? The successor of ERA anyway. Wodbaho was heading the repatriation program. And there was a genuine attempt on the part of the Eritrean government to accept the returning refugees. They did not discourage anyone from returning, but they were so incompetent that no opportunities were created to attract the refugees to return. You know, the Eritrean refugees in Sudan were very poor, especially those in refugee camps and in the settlements. And typically, poor people do not relinquish the small benefits or the livelihoods they have in anticipation of or in response to an unknown future. So in Sudan, at least they knew they could survive. But in Eritrea, it was quite unknown. They were very unsure. And poor people are risk averse. And the Eritrean refugees, as expected, did not want to take risks because there were so many uncertainties.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I was going to add one more, Thomas.
Go ahead. Yes, please. Go ahead.
How about on the other side, the political organizations who discourage them because these are their bases?
There was some attempt to do that, but you know, the unique situation in Sudan is that the government of Sudan do not allow the Eritrean opposition groups to interfere with the refugees situation. Yeah. They don't allow them. That's unique in Sudan, actually.
Yeah.
So secretly, they may try to influence their relatives, their friends, and so on, because there was a lot of campaign, hostile campaign going on, discouraging the refugees from returning. Even the Sudan the authorities in Sudan did not want the refugees to return because they were going to lose out as a result. So they were misinforming. There was a campaign of misinformation. They were telling them that they are going to forcibly marry your daughters to the disabled people, fighters in Mahabar and all that. There was a lot of dirty campaign. But how much that campaign influenced the decision of the refugees is unknown.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any more questions? Okay, I have a question about the refugees in Sudan. Some of them, as I said, have been there since 1960s, 1970s in refugee camps. What kind of right do they have? Can they go to school, or what is life there? What does it look like?
It is different actually for different refugees. Those who are from the Western lowlands and who have been there since the mid-1960s.
68, yeah.
Yeah.
The Bin Amr especially, you know, the Bin Amr, the majority of the Bin Amr used to live in Eritrea.
Yeah.
And 1/4 of the Bin Amr were in Sudan. But when the large number of the Bin Amr came to Sudan as refugees, the number of the Sudanese Bin Amr increased dramatically.
Yeah.
And because the Bin Amr are indistinguishable, those from Eritrea and Sudan, the Sudanese authorities did not have a means of distinguishing the Sudanese Bin Amr and the Eritrean Bin Amr, as long as they were protected by the Sudanese Umda or the Nazir of the Bin Amr. The Nazir of the Bin Amr, the chief of the Bin Amr, was chief for the Eritreans and the Sudanese. And as long as he wanted them to be under his domain, the Sudanese authorities couldn't do much about it. So they were actually acquiring Sudanese nationality or citizenship informally. So the majority of the Bin Amr or even other Muslim groups have acquired Sudanese nationality informally, not formally, informally. So they are okay actually, but the majority live in camps where there is no freedom of movement and residence, but those who can pass as Sudanese can very easily avoid detection and could move and interact with the locals freely. But those who originated from the Eritrean highlands were quite distinguishable. They didn't speak Arabic. They were not Muslims. The way their clothes were different. They were distinguishable. And therefore, there were lots of limitations on their freedom of movement and residence. But, you know, Sudan is a unique country. I mean, I don't know now if it is the same, but it is a very generous country. Of course, they abuse the refugees in search of bribes, but if they pay bribes, they let them go. But if you are a Bin Amr or Bin Amr or what do you call them? Those from Eastern, in the Sahel, the Eritrean Habab, you can very easily assimilate into the Sudanese society. And you don't face any problems, visible problems, of course.
Okay, thank you.
Thomas, this is Mahari. I have 2 questions.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Professor Gaim, thank you very much. I have 2 questions. One is, there was a question that was asked at this seminar, in fact, that motivated our team to invite you. How can this association, like Association of Eritrean Studies, that claims to lead professional or scholarly works can support the majority of refugees, especially in the US, there was a question, that are not reached by different forms of support yet. That's one question. My second question is when in Eritrea, from Eritrea, especially the most recent ones, my observation is they are working in various agricultural services, either poultry or the meat processing plants in many of this Midwestern United States. Is there any mechanisms or practices that you have learned over the years that could, bring, groups such as this that does not have a lot of access to educational programs, help them grow academically and become more active into the modern knowledge-based economy? Thank you.
Okay.
I hope if my questions are not clear, I'd be glad to.
No. I think I understand what you mean. They are clear. The first question is, how can the association help support the Eritrean refugees who are scattered throughout the US? Based on my own experience, one thing you could do is if there are mechanisms that enable you to connect with them, is if they have immigration problems, you could help them by writing expert reports. Most of those refugees whose cases are pending with the immigration authorities actually have lawyers. I get asked by lawyers from the US actually, asking me to write expert reports. And if you can do that very easily, you can establish your credibility by producing reliable country of origin information. If you do that, actually, if it is a reliable and credible report, it is highly likely that their cases will succeed. That is one. Secondly, probably some of them have got documents from home and they need to be translated in a reliable and credible way. And you can help them doing that. There are also refugees who need documents to be translated into English, like marriage certificates, birth certificates. I don't know if there are mechanisms in the US to enable you reach them. If you reach out, I think you will be able to identify what kind of inputs or support you can provide. These are the kind of help I provide to Eritrean refugees in this country. Here, some of it is paid if you are asked by their lawyers, but these days, actually, I am doing most of the reports for free because they exhaust their rights and they run out of all kinds of things. So in desperation, they approach me and I try my best to write a report. The report actually focuses on the reality on the ground. What happens to these people? What is the nature of the national service? What happens if they are returned? Are they going to be likely to be conscripted forcibly and sent to the war front? These are actually very important kind of assistance we can provide to our needy sisters and brothers. That is one. The second question is, I cannot, I'm not sure what he can do to help them. I have got a nephew in New York He works with the Eritreans. He doesn't work, but he works in the financial sector, but he helps new arrivals with his friends, American friends. And what they do is actually, they provide them with lots of help. Among other things, they try to teach them English, help with their children's homework, and in the process, they establish quite useful relationship or friendships, which are very helpful to the refugees. And because I don't live in America, my knowledge of America is very, very limited. But also, I don't know if you have similar problems as we have here. Most of the young Eritreans who are arriving, they have suffered so much in the national service, in the Sudan, in Ethiopia, in Libya, while crossing the Mediterranean, in Rome, in Italy, but also in Calais, in France. I don't know if you have heard about Calais. Calais actually is medieval. They live in darkness. I have taken my students several times there, and it is just beyond belief, the conditions of living there. A person who has stayed there for a couple of months needs to be rehabilitated intensively in order to recover. But what happens when they come across the Mediterranean, hiding themselves in trucks and in dilapidated boats and so on, is they have to hide, or when they come, they are not given proper housing, they are not fed properly, and they are threatened by deportation, and they end up being depressed, and youth suicide is quite high here among Eritreans. And the reason this is happening is because of all their background, the suffering they face in Eritrea, in transit, in Europe, in Calais, and also here. When they come here, they assume that everything will be fine when they come here, but they find the situation here unbearable. Also, the threat of being rejected actually haunts them day and night, because they know the reality more than anyone else. They don't want to return to Eritrea, because returning to Eritrea is like returning to hell in their view. So the first thing to do probably is to establish connection with them and enter into a dialogue with them. And in that dialogue may emerge the actions that need to be taken. But based on my own experience, or the experience of the UK, these are the things that we have been doing. I hope this, I haven't answered your question, but I have shared our experience here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other question?
Or comment, or anything.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Desale. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Gaim. It's very interesting. So my question is, you mentioned there for the mass exodus of Eritreans, you mentioned some points. One is the capital and economic decay. The other one is the endless national service.
Mm.
So my question is, are the government are doing this one on purpose, or is because of the incompetence of the government?
I wish I knew, Saleh. I don't know. I don't think they are competent, but I don't think they have good intentions either. The president is control freak from what we have been seeing. He's working alone. He has surrounded himself with mediocrities. He doesn't want to be challenged. I don't know him personally, but I have done a lot of work around the issues. And during the liberation struggle, I think there was some degree of decentralized administration. The commanders, the head of the medical departments, social services, they had some degree of autonomy. But some of the interviews I conducted with some of the fighters, prominent fighters, suggest or show that after Abet, SAS literally became a dictator. He saw the possibility of independence. And from that moment onwards, he tried to marginalize all those people who worked around him. So I don't know what the government wants. I have no idea. But if you look at the national interest and the interest of the Eritrean people and compare the actions and the impact of those actions on the Eritrean people or the country, they are quite destructive. They don't make sense. So why is the president doing all that? Is it because he's doing it deliberately, or is it because he's incompetent? Well, he wants to control everything. I don't think he cares about the independence, about the progress of the society or the development of the country. He is only interested in his power. But I think he would still have remained in power by allowing people to engage with the affairs of the country. So the question he raised is $1 million question. I don't know, dollars question. I have no idea. I don't think anybody knows, not even the people who work around him, if there are any who work around him anyway. He has got many messengers, but they are not allowed to question him. And if they questioned him, they wouldn't be there. So it is a myth, Desale.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thank you. So the other one is kind of a follow-up question. So like this organization or other intellectuals, I just, for the sake of the country, we want to have a country. So what is the best way? Is that it's better to encourage people to stay there, encourage people to come out? What is the best, the best approach, or just as an intellectual?
Yeah, I have been confronted with this question many times. It doesn't feel morally right having your own children here, going to school or working, living comfortably, to tell Eritreans who are living in a state of hell to avoid leaving the country and stay there to fight. But minus that morality, I think if everyone flees, if everyone who is unhappy with the government flees, then there will be no change forever. It is these affected people who organize themselves and bring about change. But in Eritrea, if who is going to organize to bring about change? I'm sure SAS and his entourage are celebrating when they see all the Eritrean youth, instead of staying to resist, are voting with their feet. And that is a very, 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 very sad situation. I think now, especially now, Eritreans should stay at home, not only to fight, but there are no opportunities. Europe is closed. They are returning Eritreans to Libya when they know very well that they will be tortured, they will be raped, and they will be enslaved. The generosity of that accompanied asylum is no longer there. You might have heard of the new policy in the UK now. They are going to return all those who are not recognized in first instance to Rwanda. And Rwanda is not going to receive them, but it will show them the borders to Angola. That's what they did to those Eritreans who were returned from Israel. So I think asylum is on the verge of death. It's no longer a viable opportunity, because the countries that are supposed to provide asylum have become very hostile to asylum seekers.
Dr. Gaim,
Thank you.
Thomas Algaro,
Yeah, go ahead.
I know we don't have census in a sense that, like every civilized world, they have what? Census might not be perfect, but the United States have census every 10 years. What percent of the Eritrean population do you think is outside? And you can have educated guesses or some of your own work. For sure, you have probably somebody asked you that question before. I'm thinking the Palestinian refugees and Israel and who gets in, who gets out, and all the politics and the issue of voting. So what? The light just off.
Yeah.
You need to leave the building.
Are you in your office?
Yeah, I'm in my office. So I can leave now. But what percent, of the Eritrean population is outside? From Sudan, the largest one, to Europe, the United States, and other African countries. It looks like we are losing, in a sense that there is a population. One of the main characteristics of or what is a state, the population is it's not a conspiracy theory, but is it carefully calculated that everybody leaves and then what?
I would be lying to you if I knew how many percent of the Eritrean people have left, but it is a substantial proportion of the population. And whether the government is allowing or encouraging the people to flee is also difficult to know, but they have an incentive to do that.
Yeah.
Because if all those are disaffected flee, then they can live in peace. The government there is no one to fight or to resist. It is the disaffected who organize to bring about change. And if
Yeah.
many enough to bring about change.
Thank you very much. And it's very, very wonderful seeing you. And I have to leave now before they close me also the gate.
Okay.
Very nice to see you.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions?
If time allows, I would like to ask one more question.
Yeah, go ahead, Mahari.
Okay.
Do you have a few minutes, Dr. Gaim?
I have got the whole evening for you.
Okay, good. Go ahead, Mahari.
Yeah, well, I hope this will be daytime for you so we could keep you longer. So what's your observation? Is the Eritrean refugee phenomenon unique, or is it similar to the other African immigrants from the other African countries?
I think the Eritrean refugee situation is the most long-standing problem, refugee problem. The Zimbabweans have returned home. The Mozambicans have returned home. The only comparable situation probably is the Palestinians and the Southern Sudanese, the Polisario, but Eritrean refugee problem is goes back far back than this refugee situations. The Palestine, of course, the Palestinian one is different, but I am not aware of any other refugee problem that has existed for such a long time. And the discouraging thing is there going to be any solution? Will there be any solution? If everybody is fleeing the country, Of course, the regime will not last forever. Nobody lasts forever, but we don't know. I mean, his son may take over. And if he does, do you think the Eritrean people would resist? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I can only guess like yourselves. So I don't know. It's quite disheartening, is it not?
Yes, it is. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
true. Thomas, Abraham, I have a question.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. It's well and good. It's good. We appreciate it. But my concern is, of course, I was going to ask, like the other gentleman asked, how many refugees rather than the Eritreans are, in different countries of the world, in Europe, Sudan, Libya, UK, and US, and everywhere else. Do you have any number for the refugees? But more importantly, it's not the number. My concern is what is happening. And I was hoping if there any organization, like there are so many organizations or political groups or some, who does different things. So I was hoping if there's anything like that pertaining, helping the refugees wherever they are. And I know they are getting all financial benefits here and there and all that, but that shouldn't be the end of it. How about getting out from that, token government aid and all that to help them go to school, learn the language and improve on their lives? If there any effort done in an organization at an organization level, I know you said like in the US, some communities have, some support and help them with some resources, but I was expecting more bigger than that. If there's any other, if there is any bigger organization that deals with that kind of problem.
It varies from country to country. UNHCR is mandated to help refugees in the developing countries, in Sudan, Ethiopia, and elsewhere, Kenya, and so on. But in the global north, the countries are responsible for providing the basic services and assistance to the refugees and asylum seekers who knock at their doors. But there are so many refugees, Eritreans and others, who don't receive any kind of assistance, whose status is not recognized, whose residence is not regularized. And those are people who are outside of the realm of the refugee regime. And there is no assistance for them. They have to struggle within the margin, eking out a living by engaging in risky economic activities, by working in the underground or black market. But most of them are undocumented, and I would be lying to you if I say I know what is going on. There are lots of things we don't know. Mm-hmm. Even in Ethiopia, Sudan, Uganda, and so on, Eritreans are making a living by participating in all sorts of economic activities. Mm-hmm. Now, Uganda has become the major country of asylum for Eritreans. Yeah. I think it is a very generous country, and there are very successful Eritreans who are working in South Sudan, and they have their families in Kampala. There are some Eritreans in Kenya. There are many Eritrean refugees in Ethiopia, but Ethiopia is becoming very volatile, and the quality of protection provided to Eritrean refugees is quite insecure, especially in Tigray. You might have heard what happened to the refugee camps in Tigray. Sudan, at least the refugees manage to live there, and they live on remittances received from relatives. But there isn't meaningful assistance provided to the refugees wherever they are. Libya, you may know about what is going on in Libya. There is no assistance in Libya. The refugees are in camps and they are treated as slaves. They are sometimes sold in the open market, actually. So there is a lot of suffering that is going on. And in view of those sufferings that are facing our sisters and brothers, it is an urgent situation. And we need to organize ourselves. We need to inform our friends, relatives. And I think the situation is very, very dangerous. Some of our brothers and sisters are living in a very, very volatile and dangerous conditions where they receive no assistance whatsoever. But in terms of the number he asked me, to be honest, I don't know. I don't know. It's a substantial proportion of the Eritrean population, but exactly how many, I wouldn't dare to say.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Anyone? Okay, I have a question. As you said, a substantial number of the percentage of the population of Eritrea is dispersed all over the world. And wherever we are acquiring the culture of our host countries. And a lot of the young people, unfortunately, are traumatized by their experiences migrating, going to all these places. What do you think that collective trauma, what kind of effect do you think that would have on our culture and the norms back home? Because things are, the culture, I feel like the culture has completely changed even in my lifetime between when I was young and what's going on now. And what do you think this mass migration would have, the effect of that would be on the culture in Eritrea? Just life in Eritrea overall.
I am sure this collective trauma has an impact on our behavior and our well-being. But it is not my field of expertise, so I wouldn't dare to say exactly what the impacts are. But I think there are some studies that are conducted by Eritreans who are specialists in the field. And maybe in the future, we could identify these people and invite them to lead a seminar like this one.
The reason I asked that question is I sometimes watch these videos on YouTube from Eritrea, and the themes of some of the shows are based on just people expecting remittances and living out of that. The whole, it feels like there is a whole set of mind that accepts this dependence on foreign remittance and things like that, and that kind of worries me, because that was not part of the culture when we were growing up, and now it has become just the norm, and it feels like it's a destructive kind of thing to me.
Yeah. I think some fundamental changes are taking place. This is not based on a scientific study conducted. I don't have even the capability to do that. But even when you have been in exile for probably 45 years, soon 50 probably. I haven't counted the number, but I think between 45 and 50. And I have been receiving many of my relatives since the 1970s, including now, as all of you. And if you look at the behavior of the young ones that are coming these days and compare them to those who were coming in the 80s and the 70s, they are completely different, completely different. The new ones that are coming probably have experienced bitter treatment and as a result have undergone some kind of behavioral change. They don't seem to care about each other so much. Also, when even the people who supported them to come here get in deaths and so on, when they come here, actually, they don't even, they tell me, I haven't conducted a survey, so I can't generalize, but most of the people who bring their relatives, sisters and brothers, they end up being very disappointed because there is no gratitude expressed in any way. And the reason probably is because of the suffering and torture. If a woman has been raped, gang raped in different places, I'm sure she will be affected dramatically and her behavior would change. The same a man who has been tortured and subjected to heinous kind of treatment, he would undergo change and transformation. And we can't expect that person to behave in the way our sisters and brothers behaved in the past. They need to be rehabilitated, they need to be supported, and other means of rehabilitating them, supporting them. From the day they enter these countries, letters and emails arrive from home. Send the money, send the money, send the money. They don't even know the situation the person is in. Our societies are demanding, but the reason they are becoming demanding is probably because they have no other means. But in the process, I am sure all of us are undergoing change. And those changes may be positive or in the short term, confusing, at least confusing, if not destructive. Something needs to be done. We need to organize to provide services to those who have been victimized by traffickers and others. The kind of treatment these people receive, I don't know if you have talked to someone, but when they tell you, it is very difficult to believe that they are, these people are human beings. Some of them are Eritreans, those who, the traffickers, the people who subject these people to the kind of treatment they subject the helpless refugees is beyond belief, you know. So something needs to be done. The displacement needs to end, but for that to end, change has to come in Eritrea, and change will not come by itself. It has to be brought about by ourselves.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Any more questions? Any more? If not, please join me in thanking Dr. Gaim for a wonderful presentation today. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you some other time.
Thank you very much. It was
Thank you so much.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Great discussion. Thank you.
I hope we'll meet,
Wonderful meeting. Thank you so much.
we'll
Thank
meet
you.
some other time. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Of
Giving me-
course. That's nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.